It's Fort Worth, Texas, August 2nd, 1976. Police knock on a door. A man answers. He's allowed to get dressed. He chooses an outfit and a sport coat. He walks to the police car. No handcuffs. All the while, 2 people are dead. One is a 12-year-old girl. She was shot once in the chest, and she's in a basement utility room. She had gone downstairs to get a snack. The other was a 6'10" former basketball player, shot multiple times. He staggered through the rooms of the mansion, leaving a trail of himself on the floors before he fell in the kitchen. A third person has a bullet in his spine. He'll never walk again. And a fourth person has a hole through her chest and is stumbling through the August dark toward a stranger's door, screaming a name into the night. The man who she said did it. This is the basis of the story Gary Cartwright told in his book, Blood Will Tell. It was published in 1979. It is a true crime story of a Texas multimillionaire oil man who stood at the center of 2 of the most spectacular murder trials the state of Texas had ever seen. Cartwright unfolded the story in 4 parts. So I'm going to pretty much follow that structure. And of course, I'm going to add one at the end, one that's more of my own, because there is a thread that runs under all of it. And I want you to hold onto that thread as we go through the season. If you've been following along, you've already heard some of the names that we're going to talk about in this episode, and you'll recognize them. The surface of these stories looks like a series of singular cases. Beneath that surface is a current. It's been there the whole time. I hope as we dig deeper into the season, you'll start feeling it. So, without further ado, we've got a lot to go over, so let's get started. My name is Jen Schaefer. This is Crude Acts, a Texas true crime podcast. We're on season 4, episode 3 of Murder in Print. This is Blood Will Tell. To understand what happened on August 2nd, 1976, you have to go back to 1929. Kenneth W. Davis arrived in Fort Worth that year holding a vice president title at a struggling petroleum equipment company called Mid-Continent Supply. Within a year, he owned the place. He changed its name to Ken Davis Industries. By the time he died in 1968, the company touched every corner of the global oil economy and had made him one of the wealthiest private individuals on the planet, a fortune estimated at $250 million. And he did all of this with a 6th grade education. His nickname was Stinky, not because of any personal hygiene problems, I assume, but because of his stinking attitude. That was the explanation that people gave, at least. He was a ruthless businessman, a bully of a boss, frugal to the point of being cruel. He ran Ken Davis Industries like a siege operation. Every penny accounted for, every weakness exploited, every competitor eventually absorbed or destroyed. He believed that softness was a liability, and he ran his household on the same principle. Stinky, if you will, was also the father of 3 sons, Kenneth Jr., T. Cullen, and William. And if you're expecting the story of a man who made billions and then doted on his children, well, you're in the wrong family. Stinky Davis raised his boys the way that he ran his business. Cold, disciplined. The sons weren't children to him so much as corporate assets. They could be programmed for the future. the future of the company. They worked long shifts at the family business from a very early age. Affirmation was not on the menu. Love, if it existed at all, was expressed through expectation. And it was never anything warmer than that. So, like I told you, in 1968, Stinky died, and he left his empire divided equally among his 3 sons. And this is where Cartwright, the writer of the book, this is where he understood something that a lesser journalist would have probably missed, okay? The road to what happened August 2nd, 1976, it didn't start with a murder. It started with an inheritance. Both money and temperament, what a father passes on to a son, and what that son does when the world tries to take it away from him. The story centers around the second son, Cullen Davis. Cullen was a shy kid. He was reserved. He grew into a man with a reputation for being stone cold, immovable, stubborn in the way of people who were never contradicted in their childhood, arrogant in the way of men who mistake inherited power for personal achievement. We've seen a lot of that. He had grown up watching his father command rooms and had absorbed the lesson that command was the point. Not earning it, not the building part, just the holding it. And when his father died, he took all his frugal restrictions with him. And so when those were lifted, something in Cullen flipped. He became what Fort Worth would quietly call nouveau riche, which in that social context was an accusation as much as it was a descriptor. In 1972, Cullen spent $6 million building a house on a hilltop in the southwest part of the city. It was about 18,000 square feet. It had an indoor swimming pool, master bedroom larger than most Fort Worth houses in their entirety. Cullen called it Stonegate. And it wasn't a home. I mean, this was more of a declaration, a monument to what he was at that point. He was free from the man who made him. And this monument was money unrestrained, something he hadn't experienced. Fort Worth, where he's from, Fort Worth understands declarations made in architecture. They've got the Petroleum Club, the Riglia Country Club, the Colonial Country Club. These are all just places where golf tournaments still run today. They are buildings that organize the city's upper class. And they also decide who belonged and who didn't, who was acceptable, and who merely just had the money. The Davis name did belong. It had belonged for decades. Stinky Davis made sure that even if he personally found the social obligations of wealth irritating, that they would be welcome into it and a part of it. Years later, I mean, this isn't years after he was accepted because he was already accepted in that, but shortly after his father died, he was in this mode of doing whatever he wanted to do. Cullen married a woman that the establishment didn't approve of, and his father wouldn't have approved of. And her name was Priscilla Lee Childers. So this woman, she was born working class Fort Worth. She was 5'2", big blonde hair, big personality, big, things. She had 3 marriages under her belt by 1968, which the Fort Worth Society pages noted and filed accordingly. She married Cullen, and this was his second marriage. So they're already kind of pushing it with those hoity-toity people. Priscilla was socially shrewd in the way that people who weren't born into those types of rooms have to be. She watched everyone. She read people. She adjusted. She understood immediately what the marriage meant in Fort Worth in terms of the role she'd have to play. And she played it with real precision. Like, she had it down. She had the clothes, the philanthropy. She hosted the parties. They had that mansion on top of the hill. And Priscilla was good at it. She was genuinely good at it. Fort Worth society was a game. I mean, Houston society is a game. And it does have specific rules. And Priscilla learned them pretty fast. She did make a few mistakes. She brought her friends into this world with her. And these are friends that Cullen didn't approve of. And a social ease with people across class lines that made the establishment uncomfortable. So she wasn't performing deference in the way Fort Worth society wanted her to. But she brought her own world with her. Friends Cullen didn't approve of. A social ease with people across class lines that made the establishment uncomfortable. She wasn't performing in the way that Fort Worth society wanted her to perform. She wasn't grateful in the right register. She walked into one of the most powerful households in Texas, and she acted like she belonged there because she did. She was his wife. But she had opinions, and she had a life before Cullen that she didn't pretend otherwise. And she wore what she wanted. She laughed when something was funny, and she brought her kids from her previous marriage into the mansion on the hill, and she made clear that it was her home too. Fort Worth was split over this woman immediately. Either she was a woman who had earned her place, or she was a woman who didn't know her place. And I think whichever side of the town you were on determined the answer you gave. The marriage between Cullen and Priscilla unraveled pretty quickly. Priscilla filed for divorce in 1974. In a community property state, a divorce is dismantling. What followed was years of depositions, motions, and financial disclosures. And what came out of that process was not flattering to Cullen Davis, the man running his empire. His personal debts had reached $16 million. The company his father built was under strain from the inside because of their spending. There were questions being asked that Cullen Davis didn't want asked about money, about where it had gone, and what the books actually showed. And then during this whole trial, in this exposure of his spending, the judge did something extraordinary during this divorce. He granted Priscilla the mansion, Stonegate, Cullen's $6 million declaration, his monument. The judge not only gave it to Priscilla, he banned Cullen Davis from setting foot on the property entirely. And then Priscilla's new boyfriend moved in. His name was Stan Farr. He was 6'10", former TCU basketball player. He worked in the bar business. He was not Fort Worth establishment by any measure Cullen Davis recognized, or any of the rest of them. He was everything Cullen's father would have dismissed. And he was living in Stonegate, in Cullen's mansion, on Cullen's hill, in the rooms Cullen had built to prove something to his dead father. That is a wound that does not close on its own. For 2 years, Cullen Davis looked at that hill from somewhere else, and somewhere in that looking, a decision was forming. Cold, patient, deliberate, the way everything about this man was. Wednesday, August 2nd, 1976, Fort Worth in summer, which means heat that hasn't broken and won't, and everyone was moving a little bit slower for it. Priscilla and Stan Farr went out for the evening. They went out to dinner, drinks, moving through Fort Worth's social circuit that Cullen, under court order, had lost access to. They were out close to midnight. Back at the mansion, Priscilla's daughter, Andrea, was home. She was 12 years old. A child who had grown up watching her mother negotiate a world that never quite made room for either of them. A child who went to bed in an 18,000 square foot house that night. A kid who woke up hungry and went downstairs to get a snack. What happened next is the prosecution's theory of the case. I want you to hold that word, theory, because this entire case lived and died in the space between what two witnesses saw and what a jury was willing to believe. It was believed Andrea was in the kitchen and there was a knock at the door. And sometime between 9:30 and 11, she went down. It was the back door in a basement type area. She goes down there, she opens it. The man was standing there and he wore a black wig. He had wrapped a plastic garbage bag around his right hand and arm, and he was holding a .38 caliber pistol. He forced the 12-year-old girl into the utility room. He made her kneel on the floor, and he shot her once in the chest at point-blank range. And then he stayed, and he waited. Close to midnight, Priscilla and Stan came home through the back of the mansion. Priscilla encountered the gunman almost immediately. He shot her through the chest. The bullet passed through her body in one side and out the other, but she didn't fall. She instead ran on adrenaline and fury and whatever else keeps a person moving when they should be down. Stan Farr, though, he didn't run. He was 6'10" and had apparently decided he wasn't going to run. This man was going to fight. And there was evidence of a struggle. Furniture disturbed, blood in rooms it had no business being in. Stan Farr was shot multiple times. He kept moving. He kept staggering through the house, leaving a trail of himself on the floors of the monument Cullen had built. And then he died in the kitchen. He was 30 years old. Shortly after midnight, 2 more people arrived at Stonegate. They were unexpected. Beverly Bass and Bubba Gavriel. Friends stopping by on a Wednesday night for a late drink. The kind of casual visit that happens in a social world where everyone knows everyone and the doors are usually open. Beverly Bass got out of the car. A man stepped out of the shadows near the mansion. She knew who it was. She squinted. She's like, hey, I've known him for years. I've met him through Priscilla, through Fort Worth, through the orbit of Cullen Davis's world. She'd been in the rooms with this guy. She knew his face, his build, particular way he held himself. She looked at him. And then this man shot Bubba Gavriel. The bullet severed his spinal cord. He would never walk again. Beverly Bass, freaked out, ran into the dark, down the hill screaming. She found help at a stranger's house. When police arrived, she gave them a name. T. Cullen Davis did this. Meanwhile, at this time, Priscilla was shot through the chest, bleeding, running on whatever she had left, and she made her way to a road, stopped a passing car. When they asked her what happened, she told them. She told them what happened. The gunman. She gave them a name too. T. Cullen Davis. Officers arrived at Stonegate and found shattered glass and blood. Gus Gavriel, unconscious and paralyzed on the dining room floor. Stan Farr, dead in the kitchen, shot 4 times. And Andrea Wilborn, 12 years old, dead in a basement utility room, 1 shot to the chest. Police went directly to a woman's house. Her name's Karen Master. This is Cullen's girlfriend. He was there. He'd been living there since the divorce proceedings. They found him there. He was allowed to get dressed. Chose a suit with a sport jacket, no handcuffs. And they took him in. When we get to the trial, Gary Cartwright titled this section of the book, "The Richest Man Ever Tried for Murder." Not the most dangerous man, not the most violent man, the richest man. He put the money in the title before the trial even started because Cartwright already understood what the trial was actually about. And so did everyone else in Fort Worth. They just didn't say it out loud, but everyone knew. Cullen Davis hired a lawyer. Richard Racehorse Haynes was his name. Houston born and bred, University of Houston law degree. By this point in his career, Haynes had defended a motorcycle gang accused of nailing a female follower to a tree. He defended Houston police officers charged with kicking a prisoner to death. He defended the Speaker of the Texas House, the Grand Wizard of the KKK, and of course, we know he represented John Hill in the case that we read about in our very first episode of the season. Racehorse Haynes was, of course, in short, the lawyer you hired when the law itself was not necessarily the point, when the point was the jury and the jury's assumptions and the particular shape of reasonable doubt in a specific room in a specific city within a specific year. And at this point, Racehorse had never lost a capital murder case. Haynes didn't win by being smarter than the prosecution in any technical legal sense. He won by being more ruthless about where juries actually live, what they fear, what they resent, what assumptions they carry into a courtroom before anyone speaks a word. He found the broken places in systems and worked them wider, if you will. And that was his gift. That was his entire method, it seemed, at least to me. And Cullen Davis, of course, was exactly the kind of client that this method was built for. And Cullen Davis found the way that the rich find everything through a book, not a phone book, a true crime book. I just said it. Thomas Thompson's Blood and Money, the story of Joan Robinson Hill, her death, and the Houston world of oil money and murder and ambition that surrounded it. We covered that story earlier this season. Racehorse Haynes had had his role in it. Smaller, of course, than he would have liked, but visible enough for Cullen Davis to find his name and pick up the phone. The undertow that connects everything, right? These are just little nodes in that, if you will. Haynes' first move, before the even trial started, he made his first move. And that was to get the trial moved out of Fort Worth, which knew Cullen Davis, knew Stonegate, knew the social geography of the whole case, had watched the divorce play out in the society pages, had driven past the mansion on the hill, formed their own view on who belonged there. So he moved it. Haynes moved it out of Fort Worth and into Amarillo, Texas. West Texas, Bible Belt conservative, a cattle and oil town that in the 1970s was isolated culturally as it was geographically. Amarillo in 1977 operated on a particular set of values: traditional, Protestant, skeptical of certain kinds of women, especially, differential towards certain kinds of men, a city where a divorced judge granting a mansion to a twice divorced blonde bimbo with a basketball player boyfriend, it would read differently than it did in Fort Worth. Haynes didn't just change the venue, changed the audience, a blank slate, and he knew exactly what to write on it. The trial was overseen by Judge George Dowland, described by Cartwright as a toothpick-chewing good old boy who was respected for being fair and who perfectly reflected the conservative values of the region. Haynes had studied Dowland the way he studied everything, for patterns he could use. He had essentially built his entire defense for an audience that didn't exist yet when the crime happened. And that's not legal genius. That's sociological precision in my book. The prosecution's case was strong. It was straightforward, built on a foundation that should have held. 2 eyewitnesses, Priscilla Davis and Beverly Bass, both wounded or in shock, both certain, both giving police the exact same name within hours of the shooting independently from separate locations without coordination. 2 witnesses, 1 name, no hesitation, no inconsistency. In a courtroom operating on logic, that's a powerful case. Haynes understood that this courtroom was not going to operate on logic alone. You don't defeat evidence like that by disproving it. You defeat it by making the jury not want to believe it. And the best way to get a jury to not believe something that you don't want them to believe is just to make them not want to believe the witness is the kind of person whose testimony deserved belief. So he didn't defend Cullen Davis. Racehorse Haynes prosecuted Priscilla. He built what the press came to call the second world theory, the idea that Priscilla's social orbit contained any number of people with motive to hurt her or her family, that her world, her choices, her friends, her lifestyle had created enemies, and that the prosecution had conveniently ignored those, that a woman who dressed like that and ran with people like that and had come through 3 marriages, who had the audacity to be given that mansion by a judge, was simply not a credible witness, could not be trusted to identify a man she'd known for years under the lights of her own home after being shot through the chest. I mean, the platform shoes, that athlete boyfriend, the parties, the whispers about drugs and dangerous men in a social world that respectable Amarillo would find alarming. Haynes fed it all to that jury, piece by piece, witness by witness, implication by implication. Haynes never had to prove any of it. He just had to plant it. That's the mechanism. You plant it in the soil of existing prejudice. You water it with implication. And then you let the jury tend to it. And they tend it in the deliberation room with their own assumptions doing the rest of the work privately and without accountability. That Amarillo jury pool had never been in a room with Priscilla Davis. Yet, they had already formed their opinion of her before opening arguments even finished. Haynes knew it. He built for it. He delivered on it. The trial, you want to call it that, took 13 weeks. 13 weeks of Haynes methodically dismantling the character of a woman who had been shot through the chest in her own home, who had watched a man she loved die on the kitchen floor, who had a 12-year-old daughter lying dead in a utility room below them. 13 weeks of the victim's family sitting in that courtroom, watching the system put Priscilla Davis on trial instead of T. Cullen, watching the law do exactly what it was built to do when the person at the center of it had enough money to point it somewhere else. T. Cullen Davis walked out of that courthouse a free man. The system had worked exactly as it was designed to work. One juror said afterward when he was talked to about it, he said, "Rich men don't kill their wives. They hire someone else to do it." Sit with that. That juror absorbed the class logic so completely that they even acquitted on it. Not because the evidence was insufficient, because Priscilla was insufficient. Because a woman like that in Amarillo in 1977 didn't get believed because a man with that kind of money didn't do things like that with his own hands. Rich men just don't kill their wives. And so the guy who did that walked. Cartwright titled the section of his book at the end there, "The Opera Ain't Over Till the Fat Lady Sings." And I think with that, he's winking at you. This wasn't a trial, it was a performance. Haynes was the conductor, the jury was the audience he had curated, and the fat lady never sang. Not for Priscilla, not for Andrea's family, not for Stan Farr's children, not for the people who sat in that Amarillo courtroom for 13 weeks and watched the system perform the exact thing that it was designed to perform when the money is in the room. And if you thought the acquittal was the end, you haven't been paying attention to how Fort Worth worked. In 1978, just months after walking out of the Amarillo courthouse, Cullen Davis was arrested again. This time, not for murder, for allegedly hiring someone to commit murder. Specifically, his ex-wife, Priscilla, and the divorce judge who had given her the mansion. The man who started all of this in Cullen's accounting by taking the mansion away from him. So this case began with a man named David McCrory. And he was a former friend and business associate of T. Cullen. And so this is a guy who knew where the bodies were buried, if you know what I mean, figuratively speaking. McCrory approached the FBI, and he said that Davis had asked him to arrange the killing of 15 people. 15 people. That's not a targeted hit. That is a list. That is a purge. The FBI ran a sting operation. They faked the judge's death. So they photographed him, and he was all bloody, and he was slumped in the car trunk, and they made it very convincingly that he was dead and gave it to McCrory. McCrory met with Davis in the parking lot and showed him the photograph. And Davis looked at it, pleased. And all the while, the FBI was recording this. McCrory asked if Davis wanted Beverly Bass also killed, the eyewitness who had identified him at Stonegate 2 years earlier. And on tape, Davis reportedly replied, "Yeah, all right." McCrory received $5,000. And the FBI went on lock with T. Cullen again, and he was arrested again. And he went to trial again. Cullen Davis hired racehorse Haynes again. Of course he did. So in this particular trial, Haynes argued that Davis wasn't commissioning murders, like they got it all wrong. This McCrory guy got it all wrong. He was running his own amateur investigation into an extortion plot against him. He brought in a linguistics specialist to reframe what the tape actually said. He worked the jury the same way he'd always worked a jury to find out what they're inclined to believe, and then built them a structure and let them walk into it on their own. Such a good story. The second jury totally bought it, and they found him not guilty. Now this guy, 2 trials, 2 acquittals, 2 people dead from a night at Stonegate, 1 man paralyzed for life, 1 woman who would spend the rest of her years fighting in civil court for what the criminal court had refused to give her. And then, of course, there's the man in the sport coat walking in and walking out of these courthouses a free man. Priscilla, after the second acquittal, said Cullen had realized exactly how much power his money could buy, and that he felt he could get away with anything. And all you can say is after reading all that, she wasn't wrong. Here's part 5, and I'm calling this What Accountability Looked Like, because it's going to tell the story of what happened after all that. After the acquittals, T. Cullen Davis didn't disappear. He became a born-again Christian. He married Karen Master. That was the woman's house that they went to go find him whenever he killed these people, allegedly. So he married this woman. He sold off pieces of the crumbling Ken Davis empire. what was left of it at least, but it was still enough to have a lot of money. He then wrote check, big one. One of these big checks that he wrote was to the Council for National Policy, which was launched in 1981 during the Reagan administration, the very early part of the Reagan administration. And this council was founded by Tim LaHaye and the Christian right, and their goal was to bring more focus and force to conservative advocacy. And so among its founding members was Nelson Bunker Hunt, the Hunt family. They were members of the John Birch Society. He was part of Reagan's political network. He was friends with a guy named Paul Weyrich, who is also co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, and William Kai is another wealthy John Bircher. So all these guys were founders. And then, of course, there's T. Cullen Davis, who is another one, multimillionaire, twice tried for murder and twice acquitted. What's interesting about the CNP is they became the infrastructure of the American religious right in the 1980s. They had secret meetings, no press. The social agenda of Christian fundamentalists fused together with the economic interest of the oil industry. This is welcome to Texas sort of stuff, right? So you've got that marriage going on. And you've got T. Cullen Davis funding it. Years after that, though, T. Cullen Davis was sued by the families of the victim in civil court. Bubba Gavril's father sued Davis. He won. Stan Farr's children sued Davis. They reached a pricey settlement. You could say they won. It seemed like this time he couldn't escape justice. But of course, for men like him, justice always comes in sideways. In 1987, T. Cullen Davis filed for bankruptcy. By this point, the oil economy hit a bust. The empire that his father built with a sixth grade education was gone. He went through that many. And, so for the victims, this particular cruelty of American civil law, bankruptcy becomes a shield. So the civil judgments against T. Cullen, the ones that represented what little accountability existed for what happened on August 2nd, it became a shield, and it became legally nearly impossible to collect those damages. Now, the lawyers, Racehorse, all the rest of them, they got their chunk of money. And the Council for National Policy, with all those wealthy men and their agendas, they got their money. But as of 2026, the families have not successfully collected one single dime. Davis later said in an interview that he'd agreed to the settlements, and he agreed to the settlement with Stan Farr's children, but only because he had no money left. He added without any embarrassment in this interview that he had no intention of paying the debt anyway. T. Cullen Davis is 92 years old. Still alive. He lives quietly in Colleyville, Texas. He transitioned from jet-setting oilman to modest industrial product salesman. He sells also skin protectant barrier cream and surge protectors, and he does all this from his home. He gives the occasional interview. He has never expressed remorse for anything because in his version of the events, there's nothing to be remorseful about. Priscilla Davis spent her final years in a modest one-bedroom apartment. She occasionally worked at Neiman Marcus. She spent years in civil court trying to hold Cullen accountable for what 13 weeks in Amarillo had refused to acknowledge. She partnered with Andrea's biological father, Jack Wilborn, in a wrongful death suit for their daughter. She just kept fighting. She didn't stop. Her friends said her only recurring complaint in her final years was that justice had never been served for the victim. And I would say she's right. Gary Cartwright, the writer, the man who told the story, he saw a murder trial in Fort Worth, and he understood it in a way that most people watching couldn't or wouldn't. He titled his book, Blood Will Tell. And when you finish it, you understand that the title is working on multiple levels. Blood will tell, evidence will tell, and the way a system responds to evidence, the way it elevates some witnesses and destroys others, moves a trial from one city to another, lets certain men choose their sport coats while walking to a police car without handcuffs, will tell you everything you need to know about who that system was built to protect. Cartwright honored the victims in his book. He put them on the pages as human beings, not just props in T. Cullen Davis's story. Not functions of a narrative about oil and money and power, but people with lives and futures that ended on a Wednesday night in August. Cartwright didn't let the spectacle of the trial erase them. He kept them in frame. And then he indicted the system with the precision of a surgeon who knows exactly where to cut. He understood that money was the story, not just Cullen Davis's money, but the money that moves through systems, the money that didn't stop at the courthouse door. It never does. The mansion, Stonegate, T. Cullen Davis's grand declaration, is now gone. It's demolished after years of decay. The hill it sat on is still there. It's empty and looming. The last vestiges of a Texas tragedy. All I can say is how very apropos. And that's all I have for now. If you want to go deeper into this case and into the undercurrent running beneath this entire season, I've got behind the case episodes that will be coming out on YouTube. And that's where I'm going to dig into all the backstory and what connects these stories, because they are connected and the connections are totally worth your time. It's going to take a minute. I've got the book due July 1st. So I'm going to knock out these audio episodes, finish up that book, and then I'll be focusing all my attention on behind the case. So you're going to want to see these. You're probably going to want to re-listen and then do it all in tandem. But just remember, the deeper you dig, the more crud you'll find. So come dig with me. Let's connect. You can reach me from my website. It's www.crudeacts.com. You can email me there. You can find me on the socials. And yeah, if you've got some stuff to talk about, let's talk. I like doing it. Thank you to everyone that helps me out with this. Russell, thank you to Star Symphony for my opening song. I appreciate it. And for Amy Dunlap for keeping me on track. People at Peninsula Television, Molly, my producer, all those folks there for having me on upcoming episodes of Bloodline Detectives, Green-Eyed Killers, and the television show Stalked. So I've got some exciting stuff going on, exciting television appearances, and I even have another something I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but I'm gonna. And so just hang on for that and keep listening, and we will see you next time.